Hi and welcome back to Bike Speed. So this week we're going to service this Carrera Vengeance. This bike's quite tired, but we're going to service it up and get it safe. That's the number one important thing. So we're going to make sure that it changes gear, brakes and rolls nicely. So as you can see, it's a little bit on the sort of sad side, so we're going to get everything off initially, put everything through the ultrasonic cleaner, sort out things like this cable here which was slack and loose. That was on the front derailleur. The front derailleur wasn't working at all when the bike came in. Things like the saddle here loose. As part of the service, we're going to tighten everything up, torque everything up, so that would be addressed there. Brakes, touching the handlebar grips, so we're going to adjust the brakes, make sure that they're working correctly. And actually this bike had actually had the tyre slashed, so it had gone right through the tyre, right through the inner tube. These are the sort of things that happen in the lifetime of a bike. They're sometimes unavoidable. So we break down the chain, get everything off. First of all we strip down the bike to component form. So we're going to clean the cassette, the chain set, the derailleurs, get everything nice and clean before we re-lubricate those to put them back on the bike. As you can see here, there was a missing spring on the front skewer. If they're both on there, it just helps centralise the wheel. They're not actually of critical importance on a bike, but it's the little details that we want to sort out and make sure is right. So we'll lubricate that shaft, which is quite rusty, make sure that's all operating nicely with the springs and everything like that. It's all part of the service. Spotting things like this rear derailleur hanger loose here, we'll take that off, we'll put that through the ultrasonic cleaner, and then when we put that back on, we'll actually torque that to spec to make sure that's nice and tight on the bike. And even things like this front derailleur here, you can see that front plate is a little bit worn. Now this service was not about replacing every worn out part. These bikes in the UK especially are very popular bikes for school children and young adults, so sometimes they're not actually worth investing colossal amounts of money on replacing parts to get them back to new. It's all about making them safe and at least roadworthy, and that's the essence of this service here. So getting all the chain set off. The bottom bracket on this bike actually was absolutely fine. There was no play in it, no noise. It was running as sweet as a nut, so that was one positive with the bike. Get off the brake pads, we always clean those up as you've seen in other videos. You want to check out our back catalogue, you know, we're doing this sort of thing weekly on the YouTube here. So you can see the rust on the back of that pad. We're going to clean that rust off. That's from the piston, and that's why you may have noticed in our other videos we put a little bit of grease on the back of these pads. It's to stop that rust forming and sticking to the pad and just upsetting the actuation of that brake and maybe even causing it to squeal. A little bit of grease on the back there doesn't do any harm. So off come the pedals. We don't want to put those through the ultrasonic cleaner. We'll just get the chain set itself through. Stripping down the derailleurs. Again, we take the jockey wheels off. You can see this debris form up here. This is very common on jockey wheels. I'm sure most riders have seen this at some time where you get debris build up on your jockey wheels. So I'm just flaking this off, and you can see what a ball of debris that creates. You know, that's a big old lump. You're dragging your chain through that every pedal stroke, so you're losing power, and also that's causing wear. So just by cleaning up the components, you can see what a difference it can actually make to the bike when it goes back out on the road. It's, you know, it can make a huge difference. So everything's been through the ultrasonic cleaner. We've got a 6-litre ultrasonic cleaner with a water soluble degreaser. That's the key with that, is that you can wash it off afterwards. So once it's been through the ultrasonic cleaner, we wash everything down as we're doing here in warm soapy water. Washes off all that degreaser and sort of debris that's left mixed in with that as well, because although it's gone through the ultrasonic cleaner, it doesn't always make them absolutely spotless. It just agitates the dirt on the part, and you can just wash it down nicely. I'm going to wash the chain as well. Again, with this chain, it's salvageable, so that's what we're doing. We're just using a wire brush on there just to clean up the plates on the front of the chain. The rollers are all okay, so we can reuse that chain. Washing everything down. Even things like this spoke protector on the back of the cassette, we'll just give that a little clean up. It makes a world of difference to the way the bike's presented before we begin the lubrication process. So we're just now lubricating up the rear derailleur here. Even things like the thumb adjusters here, I even lubricate those. A little bit of grease on those can make the world of difference to your adjustments throughout the lifetime between services. You got to remember, this isn't a service for life. This is a service from one service to another. So if you're having your bike serviced yearly, 6 monthly, 2 yearly, whatever it be, if you've gone through these sort of processes, it just makes everything next time easier. So I'm always looking to futurize a bike, you know, future proof it to the next service to making sure that that's easier for me to do, and also that the bike will last nicely between each service. So now we're just replacing this spring off of the skewer. Again, they're not absolutely essential on a bike, but they make the world difference to centralising the wheel nicely and easily for the quick release effectively. So that's what we just did there. Cleaning up the brake pads now. So we clean off them with a wire brush and then we skim them on our machine, and it's just a way of sort of making those stop squealing and a nice actuation to your brake again before we wash down the frame. So initially we've just done some parts with the detailing brush to get off thicker debris, as we're doing here on the brakes and the bottom bracket. Then we wash down the entire bike with a nice soft bristled brush as we're using there, and then we dry down the frame with a microfiber towel. Microfiber towels are absolutely great. They're a life-changing rag to be using in the modern world. They're best invention ever, a microfiber towel, because they don't scratch the surface and they absorb off all that moisture. So again, we're just on the hub there, we were using brake cleaner rather than a degreaser. It evaporates away quickly and makes that cleaning process much easier without impregnating the bearings themselves with degreaser. And then we're just cleaning up the disc emery pad on there just to take off any scores on the disc itself, which will stop squealing and also give you a much newer feel to your brake actuation. So we clean up the pads and the discs, and then we'll adjust the brakes along the way, and that brake will be completely different. I noticed a little bit of play in the rear axle. That was actually on the bearing cups themselves. This is a cup and cone system rather than sealed bearings on this bike. In an ideal world we would have replaced the bearings, but because this is a very limiting process of not spending too much money on the bike, we just adjusted those up, and that's now absolutely spot on and feeling nice. A little bit of grease on the hub itself before putting the cassette back on. That will help that come off next time, and torque that up to the correct spec. Check the disc bolts as well. All these things you need to be doing, and then we're just going to actually replace this blown tyre and tube. So off comes the old tyre. It was a shame because this tyre was actually in much better condition than the rear tyre. It was a shame they didn't do the other one, but never mind, these things happen, don't they? We're getting the new tyre and tube in there, lining up the Schwalbe logo with the valve. That's just one of my own things that I always do, and it's good practice really, and it's a sign of the mechanic really if they're lining up logos and things as to their nature in terms of getting your bike right when you take it in somewhere to get it serviced or tyres replaced or whatever. So now we're rebuilding the bike. Little bits of grease here and there to stop metal to metal from corroding. That's what you're always sort of looking at, the future of replacing parts, removing parts, reservicing parts. We could just bolt that all together and would make it an awful lot harder next time to service if it wasn't all greased correctly. On goes that rear derailleur hanger that we spotted that was loose, so we torqued that up before putting the derailleur back on the bike. And you can see it's all beginning to come together now. So we've stripped the bike down, cleaned everything, lubricated everything. You can see there I just put a little bit of grease on the back of the pads as I mentioned before. That's just to stop that corrosion sticking those pads to the pistons and creating problems in the future. Again, that future proofing process of a service. And then we're really beginning to get the bike back together now with the chain going back on. And this is always the bit I love really, is getting the chain back on a bike, because you sort of give it its life back with the chain. So lubricating the rollers, remember it's the rollers between the plates you're trying to lubricate when you lubricate your chain. You're not trying to make the chain all wet all over, it's the rollers you need to lubricate. They're a bearing in themselves, they have to free roll in order to give a nice actuation to your gears and also to your pedal stroke and everything else. So just adjusting everything up now, we're going through the bike, adjust the gears, adjust the brakes, make sure those brakes are actuating nicely before we then run through the bike with a torque wrench. This is sort of the final bit that can make the world of difference to the way your bike will last between services. If everything's torqued correctly to the correct specification, stuff's not going to come loose, come undone, or even break off because it's been over tightened. Things like this saddle clearly wasn't tightened correctly in the first place. It probably had never had a torque wrench on it. Someone put the saddle on, did that with an Allen key of some description, and it was wrong. So we torqued that up, and that saddle won't come undone between services. Yeah, we just work our way through. We go front to back, and then just odd little things like this. The Carrera logo was bent up, so we're just going to straighten that. It's probably been caught at some point, and just straighten it up. New little bit of tape underneath there, double-sided tape, just to stick that back down. And things like the handlebar end plugs here, Bike's been dropped on the floor at some point, lost the ends of the handlebar grip, so a little plug in the end there, and what a difference we can make to a bike. So please subscribe to the channel. We're pleased you're here and we like to see you subscribing, so subscribe, hit the notification bell, and we'll see you again next week. So thanks for watching and bye for now.